And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson, Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted an interactive calendar to display your Drupal events with drag and drop rescheduling and without using jQuery? There's a module for that. It's called Fullcalendar, and it was created in September of 2010 by user A Blondo, though I've been personally responsible for the last couple of releases. It has a 7.x-2.0 and 3.0.0 beta 2 versions available, the latter of which supports Drupal 10 and 11. It is actively maintained. In fact, that latest release was just this morning. And it does have security coverage, though technically the 3.0.x branch won't have it until it has a stable release. It does have test coverage, although minimal on today, but there's more on the roadmap. For documentation, there is a user guide, but it's currently more focused on the D7 version, so definitely something that also needs some focus. It does have 337 open issues, but none of those are bugs against the 3.0.x branch. And it is currently in use by 3,388 sites, according to Drupal.org, though the vast majority of those are using the D7 version, since the 3.0 version is very new. Now, as we mentioned at the top, one thing that sets this module apart is that it uses Fullcalendar View without relying on jQuery. It does also have a few sort of Drupal-specific enhancements, including things like the ability to drag and drop to alter events. You can optionally turn on a requirement for confirmation, so making sure people don't accidentally reschedule events. It can also display sort of toast-style notifications when updates are actually saved to the database. You can double-click on a day or time to create an event at that time. You can display events from different content types, even if they use different fields to store dates. And yes, that means you can even include different kinds of fields. So as an example, a mixture of core and smart date fields will work in your calendar. You can set default colors and output type, block or the newer list item display, and the ability to override color based on content type or a taxonomy reference. Now, this module had been essentially dormant for about 4 years, but I decided to work with Jürgen Haas, who listeners may know from ECA, on reviving it after a similar and popular project called Fullcalendar View was not only marked as minimally maintained and maintenance fixes only, but the project page directed users to contact the maintainer to pay for a premium version in order to use the current version of the Fullcalendar JS library or to load events via Ajax, which has been an often requested feature because Fullcalendar View has had common reports of performance problems on sites with lots of event data. Worse, the maintainer has closed as won't fix issues that had community-provided patches because he only wanted to provide said improvements in the paid premium version. Now, in my work on the events recipe for Drupal CMS, I knew that having a solid calendar would be important, and I didn't feel good about relying on a module that seemed to be pushing users more and more towards a paid model. So I'm grateful to Jürgen and everyone who worked on Fullcalendar before us for creating such a robust and extensible codebase. But let's talk about Fullcalendar.
Question: Is this was this part of the Dries note in Barcelona? I know I seem to remember an example where maybe they were like, "Oh, we're going to move the date," and it showed them dragging and dropping. Was that this?
So the simple answer is no. At that time, Fullcalendar didn't have the drag and drop capabilities.
Okay.
But I would say the interface is the same, and today it has those capabilities and more.
Got it. So that was kind of like an example of what the module can do today.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, I can definitely understand the need for a very robust calendar system in Drupal. I feel like ever since my beginning workings in like Drupal 7 or maybe even Drupal 6, right? It's always been like, oh, we need events and we need reoccurring events, and oh, we want to display them on a calendar for people to see. And it's like, okay. And like I don't know. I think probably around Drupal 8, we probably got into like, yes, calendars and events, and now we're kind of doubling down on that with a lot of the work that you're doing. one other question: is this part of the event platform that you're working on? Like, is this going to be part of that at some point? If
So
not,
the answer on whether or not it's part of a event platform today is no. Certainly open to potentially having that. There are some things around being able to sort of like show different times or days as sort of blocked off that you can do with Fullcalendar that could be interesting, but would probably want to have some more discussion with actual camp organizers to sort of figure out what's the right fit for it.
oh
Yeah.
man, I would love to have that discussion because I just went through scheduling, putting our schedule together, and like this activity could maybe be easier with a calendar view. I don't know.
I'd love to have a separate discussion with you on the scheduling features built into the event platform, but that feels like maybe a different show.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I I have to say I love that this is back. I mean, I feel like in Drupal 7 you had a few options. Like you had this one, you had the calendar module, but I feel like after Drupal 8, the calendar module is still around, but there really weren't any well-supported ones. I know Matthew Scarset has the calendar view module that I've used as in a couple of proof of concepts. It's really easy to set up, but it felt like there really wasn't a good way in Drupal for a long time to really just have a calendar. From my perspective, I like that because I feel like lists are usually better anyway, and they're easier to style, and you don't have to deal with all the accessibility issues. But it also, especially with Drupal CMS coming up around the corner, it does feel like a gap, right? To have to rely on something external, or a ton of work to build that. So, between this and calendar view, hopefully we'll have something robust
I have
moving
a
forward.
I have a future forward question, and maybe you said this somewhere and I missed it, but are we thinking like could this functionality make it into Drupal core at some point? I know like we're probably going to have it in Drupal CMS, but like do we think like events and calendar functionality could be in core at some future point, or is this like always going to live in contrib?
Well, so one of the things that was new in all the way back in Drupal 8 was the inclusion of core datetime fields, and then later on date range fields. I haven't heard of any real appetite to sort of significantly expand that. And I would say now that we're in an era of Drupal CMS, I would probably see that as being the path forward in terms of saying, let's make those features easy to drop into a site built on
Yeah.
Drupal CMS, or maybe even just, apply a recipe that ships with Drupal CMS so that it's basically clicking a button to have that capability available.
Yeah, that makes way more sense as far as like a recipe that enables a lot of this functionality. So that's definitely
The
cool.
the other thing to consider, especially with these types of things, if you're including them in core, Full Calendar does rely on a JavaScript project, right? And so that's additional dependencies that you now have to manage. And if they change their API or update, core is now tied to that. And that's actually one of the, even as helpful and as informative. Like the team that manages jQuery, they interact with Drupal. That's been a major problem with Drupal maintenance cycles because Drupal is outside of the same maintenance window as those. And so anytime there's a deprecation or removal, it can cause problems. We had that same problem with CT Editor for a time. But like any external dependencies that you add, also you have to consider what the cycle looks like for Drupal core as well. So if it's in contrib and full calendar updates to a new version or changes an API, Martin and contrib can just modify that and write some backwards compatibility code. But if that's in core, it's a much, much higher burden.
I have I have so many off module of the week topic questions here. So your first bullet point here when you're talking about features and functionality is no jQuery, right? So there's no need for jQuery obviously for this. Um I feel like that's like something that's becoming more common in Drupal is like moving away from jQuery. So like that kind of is self-explanatory, but I'm wondering like I know that we're moving, I don't know, the moving towards React could be like a kind of heavy-handed statement, but I know that some of the new UI for Drupal CMS is going to be React based. Is that something that like you think this might move into at some point, or maybe in a future version?
I'd have to double check. I'm pretty sure that Fullcalendar is compatible with sort of React and Vue front ends, but so I don't see it as sort of like something that could be like a significant blocker if
Yeah.
more of the UI starts to move into being like React or Vue based. But definitely something to keep in mind, I suppose.
Yeah, I would assume, I haven't looked at the code yet, but I would assume a lot of it is vanilla JS that you can like hook into, like use React or Vue to hook into it. I know I've written JavaScript that was like that, right? Where the base was vanilla and then you can plug and play and do React or Vue or whatever other framework you like to use for your JavaScript. But yeah, it'll be cool to see what happens there.
All right. Thank you, Martin. And if our listeners wanted to suggest another module of the week, what's the best way for them to do that?
We are always happy to get nominations for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as ManClue on all of the Drupal and social platforms.